Hello and welcome to Camp, the Catholic Audiobook in a Month podcast. My name is William Wilson, and today is day 3 of The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. I will be reading Spiritual Maxims 2 through 4. First, we'll hear about worshiping in spirit and truth. By spirit, Brother Lawrence is referring to the depth of our being, and he says that practice makes this clear. In truth means acknowledging what or who God is, and that's infinitely perfect. And also, truth refers to how we live our lives contrary to His will. Next up is a section on the union of soul. Now, I found this to be very confusing, so I did a little research and I'll share that with you. 3 types of presence and union are discussed. First, general. This refers to God being present solely by grace. Second is virtual, and this is by action, where we consciously make an effort, and therefore we have God's presence and God's union in that action. And the third is actual, and this is perfect union. And this is ongoing at all times. It's the, quote, I don't know what of St. John of the Cross. He also in this section discusses the necessity of denying one's will and to be detached in all things and therefore free to love God. And finally, in the third maxim, which is on the presence of God, he discusses what is this presence like. And so that includes a realization of God by imagination or understanding. So think St. Ignatius when it comes to imagination and his method of contemplation and meditation. Secondly, it's like a habit. Third, it's like intercourse in the depths of our being. Fourth, it's like the fire of love. Fifth, it's like favors past numbering. And finally, sixth, it's like life and nourishment to the soul. So that's our reading for today. Let's get started. Of how it is required of us to worship God in spirit and in truth. There are 3 points in this question which must be answered. 1. To worship God in spirit and in truth means to offer to Him the worship that we owe. God is a spirit. Therefore, we must worship Him in spirit and in truth. That is to say, by presenting to Him a true and humble spiritual worship in the very depths of our being. God alone can see this worship, which, offered unceasingly, will in the end become, as it were, natural, and as if He were one with our soul, and our soul one with Him. Practice will make this clear. 2. To worship God in truth is to acknowledge Him to be what He is, and ourselves as what in very fact we are. To worship Him in truth is to acknowledge with heartfelt sincerity what God in truth is, that is to say, infinitely perfect, worthy of infinite adoration, infinitely removed from sin, and so of all the divine attributes. That man is little guided by reason, who does not employ all his powers to render to this great God the worship that is His due. 3. Furthermore, to worship God in truth is to confess that we live our lives entirely contrary to His will, and contrary to our knowledge that, were we but willing, He would fain make us conformable to Him. Who will be guilty of such folly as to withhold even for a moment the reverence and the love, the service and the unceasing worship that we owe to Him? Of union of the soul with God. There are 3 degrees of union of the soul with God. The first degree is general, the second is virtual union, whilst the third is actual union. 1. That degree of union is the general, which one finds when the soul is united to God solely by grace. 2. Virtual union, which is in effect union, though not in fact. is our state when, beginning any action by which we are united to God, we remain so united to Him by reason of that action for such time as it lasts. 3. Actual union is the perfect union. In the other degrees, the soul is passive, almost as it were slumbering. In this actual union, the soul is intensely active. Quicker than fire are its operations, more luminous than the sun, unobscured by any passing cloud. Yet we can be deceived as to this union by our feelings. It is not a mere fleeting emotion, such as would prompt a passing cry, "My God, I love thee with my heart's full strength." It is rather a state of soul, if I can but find words, which is deeply spiritual and yet very simple, which fills us with a joy that is calm indeed, and with a love that is very humble and very reverent, which lifts the soul aloft to heights where the sense of the love of God constrains it to adore Him, and to embrace Him with a tenderness that cannot be expressed, and which experience alone can teach us to understand. 4. All who aspire to union with the divine should know that whatever can gladden the will is in fact pleasing to it, or at least so the will reckons it. There is no one but must avow that God is beyond our understanding. To be united to Him, it is needful therefore to deny to the will all tastes and pleasures, bodily and spiritual, that, being thus detached, it can be free to love God above all things. For if the will can in any measure come to know God, it can do so only through love. The difference is great between the tastes and sentiments of the will and its working, since the will's tastes and sentiments are in the soul as in their bounds, whilst its working, which is properly love, finds its sole end in God. Maxim 4. Of the Presence of God. 1. The presence of God is an applying of our spirit to God, or a realization of God as present, which is borne home to us either by the imagination or by the understanding. 2. I have a friend who these 40 years past has been practicing through the understanding a realization of the presence of God. To it he gives many other names. Sometimes he calls it a simple act, or a clear and distinct knowledge of God. At other times a view as through a glass, a loving gaze, an inward sense of God. Yet again he terms it a waiting on God, a silent converse with Him, a repose in Him, the life and peace of the soul. Still, my friend tells me that all these ways in which he has expressed his sense of the presence of God come to the same thing, and that the presence fills his soul quite naturally, that it has come so to pass in this way. 3. He says that by unwearying efforts, by constantly recalling his mind to the presence of God, a habit has been formed within him, of such a nature that, so soon as he is freed from his ordinary labor, and not seldom even when he is engaged thereon, his soul lifts itself up above all earthly matters, without care or forethought on his part, and dwells, as it were, firmly stayed on God, as in its center and place of rest, faith almost always being his companion at such times. Then his soul's joy is full. It is what he calls the actual presence, and includes all other kinds and greatly more besides. Then it is he feels that only God and he are in the world. With him he holds unbroken converse, asking from him the supply of all his needs, and finding in his presence fullness of joy. 4. Let us mark well, however, that this intercourse with God he holds in the depths of his being. There it is that the soul speaks to God, heart to heart, and over the soul thus holding converse there steals a great and profound peace. All that passes without concerns the soul no more than a fire of straw, which the more it flares, the sooner burns itself out. And rarely indeed do the cares of this world ever intrude to trouble the peace that is within. 5. But to come back to our consideration of the presence of God, you must know that the tender and loving light of God's countenance kindles insensibly within the soul, which ardently embraces it, so great and so divine a fire of love to God that one is perforce compelled to moderate the outward expression of the feelings. 6. Great would be our surprise if we but knew what converse the soul holds at these times with God, who seems to so delight in this communion, that to the soul, which would fain abide ever with him, he bestows favors past numbering. And as if he dreaded lest the soul should turn again to things of earth, he provides for it abundantly, so that the soul finds in faith a nourishment divine, a joy that has no measure, beyond its utmost thought and desire, and this without a single effort on its part, but simple consent. 7. The presence of God is thus the life and nourishment of the soul, and with the aid of his grace it can attain thereunto by diligent use of the means which I will now set out. That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the reading. I left you on a little bit of a cliffhanger there. Tomorrow I will read Maxims 5 through 6, where we will hear about the means for attaining unto the presence of God, and we'll also hear about the benefits of the presence of God. If you have enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe, rate, share, and help us grow. Also, please check out oratebooks.com, now featuring The Ways of Mental Prayer by Vital Léodet, praised by Pope St. Pius X and spiritual leaders across generations. This masterwork guides readers through the transformative journey of prayer, from its foundational practices to its most profound mystical heights. That's oratebooks.com. If you'd like to learn more about us, please visit camp.fm. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you tomorrow.